Hi, you're listening to Kill the Cat. Welcome to episode 3 of our Marvel Madness series. In this episode, we're looking at the Marvel animated series, What If? In particular, episode 4, What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands? This was by far one of our favourite episodes, and a great example of how to use tragedy and negative character arcs to allow us to watch our favourite characters become the worst versions of themselves. Spoilers ahead for the episode and for the What If series as a whole. Now, enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Kill the Cat. Today we are talking about the What If series. We're talking about one episode.
Yeah.
That's the Doctor Strange episode.
What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? Which is a very clunky episode title. But other than that, I don't really have any complaints about this episode.
Yeah.
What If was a unique Marvel series. I personally really liked it.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. There's some key moments that are just brilliant throughout.
Just talking about favourite episodes. Zombies, fun.
Yeah.
The Natasha and Clint team up and the apocalypse was amazing.
Yeah, and Clint being able to sacrifice himself for Natasha was just beautiful.
And that's right before we got Hawkeye, which of course is all about Clint dealing with Natasha's death. And then it all came together in the end. Yeah, which was a nice surprise.
Because initially it seemed like they might do a all together thing. And then watching the episodes, I was like, oh no, it seems to be standalone stories. And then you get Ultron turning around.
Against the Guardians of the Multiverse.
I see you. Yeah, just... the second last episode, such a phenomenal episode, the Watcher versus Ultron. But yeah, the whole thing was it was so much fun. It was just nice to do some alternate universe stuff, to see some pair-ups that you don't really get to see.
I love that we got a Bucky and Peter team up. That was so fun. Yeah. That's one of my favourite fanfic pair-ups. Mm-hmm. It's fun to watch them do that. But also, I think it appealed to a really dark sense of humour that Kiwis and Australians tend to have.
Yep.
My favourite moment in the series was Steve getting cut in half by his shield by Bucky and then being like, guess this is the end of the line, Cap. That was so dark and I loved it. Right after seeing Sam get cut in half right in front of him.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm down for all that.
Yeah.
Obviously not in canon. I mean, this is canon. But it was this fun thing of it didn't matter if things ended badly, which we're going to talk about today, because it's a what if, right?
Yeah.
It's little moments in time and things go badly. Okay, we're going to go into another multiverse. It's fine. Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see season 2 of this and the zombie series they're doing.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
More Ant-Man's head
in a jar
with the Doctor Strange cloak of levitation.
But there's a reason we wanted to talk about Doctor Strange. It stood out as an episode for both of us that was probably one of the best standalone episodes of the series.
Yeah,
probably the best.
It was kind of the only one if these really were standalone shorts and we didn't end up with the Guardians of the Multiverse. I feel like this is the only episode that felt complete in itself.
Yeah.
And if you gave these to someone as a book of short stories, I think this would be the only one beginning to end. That would be a good short story.
So specifically what we're talking about in this is how to write a tragedy. The brief summary of this episode, Doctor Strange, Christine are in a car accident, Christine dies, and that is what motivates Doctor Strange to go and find the sorcerers and practice the magic arts. And he then eventually tries to go back in time and to change that, but learns that it's a fixed point in time because without Christine's death, he never would have become Doctor Strange. By erasing her death, he would be creating a paradox. So he can't...
And, Dormammu would win.
Yeah.
They can't have that. So it is a very firmly fixed point, which he is told he can't change. And he decides, well, actually, yes, I can.
Yeah. He needs enough power to do so, learns to absorb the power of other creatures, ends up getting enough power and destroying the universe in doing so. But when he saves Christine, she's terrified at the sight of him, and then she still disappears anyway, and he is left in a bubble in the middle of the space between the universes. I don't know what the space
in his destroyed universe. So this is It's nice like references to like Lovecraftian horror. It's a gothic horror story. We got castle and dark magic, like doubles and evil twins. It's a really common trope in gothic fiction, and it ends badly, as we said, but it still feels like a satisfying ending. So we talked about Captain America, K.M. Weiland's flat change arc. This is a negative change arc, specifically what she calls a corruption arc for a character.
So why don't we talk quickly? Why do a corruption arc? Why do tragedy? What's the purpose of it?
So the whole point of doing a story of any kind usually is to have a message and a theme. And usually, especially in superhero movies, we see someone overcoming that theme, becoming better, teaching us how to be better. Or we have someone like Steve Rogers who inspires us to stick to our morals to make the world better. But we can also do this through a negative change arc where we see characters refuse to change. They embrace what Weiland calls the lie and never embrace the truth, and therefore they fall at the end. And that's what most of us do in our regular lives until we go to therapy. We make the same mistakes over and over and over again and don't learn.
Yeah, and tragedy, it kind of offers a different sort of closure to like the positive change arcs, which, you know, that's like 90% of stories we tell now. But yeah, they're tales of going too far or being reckless. Icarus flies too close to the sun, right? Juliet awakes to find Romeo has poisoned himself. They're kind of like a reflection on our human flaws and the nihilistic realities of the universe, not actually caring about whether you learn your lesson or you don't.
Which is where the Lovecraftian ideas come in.
Yeah, like you don't get a prize for learning your lesson if you learn it too late. Like you've got to...
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is the tragedy, right? Because Stephen finally learns after it's far too late to do anything.
Yeah, he's like, punish me, don't punish the universe for what I've done. And it's like, no.
And the Watcher was like, too late.
Yeah.
By the way, we understand that in the series, Doctor Strange comes back and we're going to just focus on as if he has this ending.
Yeah.
Just for teaching purposes.
Which he does still, like, he is still left to that universe.
Yes.
But he is left to eternally maintain the other universe so that Ultron can't get out.
Yes.
And so there is a sort of, he's left with a purpose. But yeah, it's still a devastating ending for Doctor Strange. Tragedy, like sort of positive change, like victory, basically, still needs to be earned. I think that's one of the things that you really can't undersell the importance of that. And in story structure, tragedy is the ending, not like we get sad points and we get tragedies throughout a lot of structures, but it'll often be the like midpoint turn or the darkest hour where things go downhill for our hero and then they rise above that. In tragedy, it is the end point. Like, they lose.
Which we've seen a little bit in, like, Civil War and Infinity War. But we understand that that is an ongoing arc, and we're going to get to Endgame.
Yeah. Infinity War, we have that sad ending, but we know that actually that's just the darkest hour in a bigger timeline. So we're okay with it. It doesn't sit the same way with the audience afterwards. It doesn't leave you contemplating like, oh, they've made a mistake here.
Yes.
They haven't. They fought well. They did what they could.
I guess you could argue it's like it all kind of starts with Steve and Tony arguing in Civil War. Because if they hadn't done that and if they had kept the Avengers together, this wouldn't have happened. Which is why, you know, they all unite at the end, which is what eventually defeats Thanos.
Yeah. And earned tragedy has a satisfaction to it, I find. Like you get to the end of this episode and you're like, yeah, that was the way for this to end. There had been enough build up. And this is something in horror films as well that's really common, you know, where often you'll have the main character die at the end. And it's like, actually, they shouldn't die just because there's a monster. They should die because they were silly and they've made bad decisions throughout. And it should be thematically appropriate as well, which it is in this case. Sometimes
it's good to inspire your audience and sometimes it's good to scare them.
Yeah. As I was doing my breakdown of this, I kind of came to sort of 5 ingredients, I want to call it, of tragedy. And I think that's where we're going to go for this. First ingredient of good tragedy, the flaw.
Yes, the character's fatal flaw. In the new Doctor Strange movie, Christine calls this as Stephen's need to always hold the knife. So yeah, his thing here is Christine dies, and it's not just his love for her, it's his need to fix everything.
Yeah.
And he says that to himself. This isn't love, this is arrogance, this is our need to fix everything. That's his fatal flaw.
Yeah. In a lot of tragedies, it tends to be like the chase for power and that kind of like Shakespearean tragedies. That was quite a common motif.
The power, money, riches, fame.
Yeah. But as you said in this one, it's the sort of obsession with needing to fix things and obsession with needing to bring Christine back. And we see that flaw throughout. Like we see him say, trying to relive that night over and over again. Even some of the lines he says to her, like, where he's like, say the word and I will give you the world. I only want you and you're the only thing that matters. Like, it's that kind of stuff. It sets up the flaw of Stephen. And we know that he's arrogant. We know that he thinks he's bigger than the multiverse. Like, we've seen that in the canon.
Yes.
Like the mainstream MCU movies.
The 616 universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we already know that about Stephen, and so seeing him go down this path isn't all that unrealistic.
Yeah, so we see him overcome this flaw in Doctor Strange 2016 film, where he gives up repairing his hands to pour his power into more noble things, and that's how he defeats Dormammu. That's essentially the first act of this movie. It's kind of recapping Doctor Strange with Christine's death.
Yeah, ingredient number 2 then comes in, which is the warning. So in every tragedy, in order to earn the tragic end, the protagonist really needs to be warned about what's coming. If you just have your protagonist suddenly lose and they had no sense that that was coming, your audience is going to be left going, well, why did that happen?
I'm just like, that was unfair.
Yeah.
We need to see the exits the character isn't taking.
In the horror movie, the guy goes down into the basement and gets eaten by the monster. Well, he shouldn't have gone down into the basement.
We're just yelling at him for being stupid.
Yeah. In this one, there's warnings all throughout. There's the warning about abusing the power of the time stone. Wong says, I suggest you join me before you do something reckless. The Ancient One telling him that you can't reverse an absolute point. And she says, this path only leads to darkness and the death of this reality.
Yeah, another reason this episode is so great, if you want to study like a negative change arc or a corruption arc, Stephen literally says lines that K.M. Weiland has in like her book.
They outline exactly what they are doing.
Yes, it hits every point to the beat where like Stephen or other characters are naming points, which is fine. I didn't notice as I was watching it all.
Yeah, I noticed when I had gotten my points and went back and watched. I'm like, yes, they are filling everything I've written down perfectly. Amazing. There's like, as he's absorbing all the creatures, you're seeing his body get twisted and contorted into that of those creatures. The fact that centuries pass as he's amassing the power to do what he's going to try and do. And then they do an interesting thing where they change perspectives after he's got the power he needs, or he gets most of the power and then realizes that he doesn't have everything he needs. And we see good Doctor Strange and we take his perspective for a little bit so that the evil Doctor Strange we've been following can be the villain or the antagonist for a little while.
And it gives us some hope.
Yeah.
We were only 4 episodes into What If at that point. I think we still had a little hope. By the end, you're like, yeah, everything ends badly.
Yeah.
Which again is fine. That's what the series is.
And then the very obvious warning of like, the universe is actively falling apart now. Like, you're seeing people sort of disappear. Yeah,
and that's his final warning, right? It's literally himself being like, you need to stop this. But like you said, it's been centuries. Sunk cost fallacy is kicking in. He's like, I've come so far, I'm nearly there.
Yeah. Ingredient number 3 is the false victory. This is just flipping the script on positive change arcs and the classic 3-act structure, where you'll have like a midpoint failure for your protagonist where they'll lose and then they need to get themselves back up, and then they have their darkest hour and they've got to get themselves back up. In this case, Doctor Strange is actually able to bring, like, he gets the power he needs to bring Christine back. And he does. He brings her back. And then she is scared of him and it's all goes downhill from there. But there is a sense of false victory. He finds a way to break the fixed point and he gets the power he needs.
Which, yeah, is that warning about going after the wrong thing. And in a positive change arc, you would be confronted with the hero's wants versus needs. And they would pick what they need instead and probably give up what they want. Negative change arc, Stephen does not take what he needs, he takes what he wants. And then that leads us to your next point.
Point 4 is the realization. So you have to have the character realize that they've made an error. And this happens in stories where, so like the classic is like they got what they wanted, but it wasn't what they needed kind of arc, where they have to have a realization and that's what lets them change their perspective. But in a tragedy, that needs to come too late. And in this one, he realizes as the world is collapsing in on him, as Christine's disappearing, he's trying to hold everything together and he calls out to the Watcher. He's like, this was all me, like, punish me. And the Watcher doesn't doesn't intervene, which leads to point 5, or ingredient number 5, which is the consequence. The climax of your tragedy should be the realization that they've done wrong. The resolution then is them facing the consequence. They learn too late, and then they face the full brunt of their consequence without mercy. The consequence in this case is that Christine comes back to life but is terrified of what Stephen's become, and then the universe collapses in, and then she still disappears. So even after everything, he can't bring her back.
And then he doesn't even get to die. Like, he doesn't even get that mercy. He gets that very, like, Call of Cthulhu style, like, horrific ending of you're going to be alone in this little bubble.
For eternity.
For eternity, yes. Cam Winans' notes on that was, once that happens, get out. Like, tragic ending, he's in the bubble, end.
Yeah.
You don't need to dwell on that point.
Because the consequence is the resolution.
Yes.
Right? And so you've seen what's going to happen. And that's where you then get left like, oh shit. Like that's that's how the audience should feel after a tragedy. You have to let your audience sit in that for it to have the full impact.
There's something very impactful about seeing a character going down a dark path and knowing where they're going to end up. Like I said, there are moments of false hope where you're hoping he's going to turn back. Yeah. But you kind of know, like something like this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. He gets warnings, he gets out, and just not taking them. Because again, that's what we do. Yeah. Like, we act certain ways because of our environments and our upbringings, and we tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very sobering is the word I'd put down. Yeah. Of like, you can't escape the consequences of that. Yes, and sometimes it comes too late. Which is also a little sad. Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about how do you not make this preachy? Because I've talked about this on previous episodes, and we've both seen a lot of student films. Seen a lot of films where protagonists give into drugs or alcoholism. Yeah, and it just comes across as very preachy and not very realistic. I think to avoid preachiness and to avoid that student film thing, we really we understand Stephen is wrong. We understand he shouldn't do this. We also really understand why he wants this to happen. Yeah. And again, I like that choice to make it not just about essentially fridging Christine. It's more about his ego and his arrogance. Yeah. He does love her, but it's more about, he thinks he can fix anything. I think if this was a love story, I would, like a straight out love story, I think it would be really boring. I think there is something in his motivation is external. Like, it is Christine is the motivating factor, but his flaw is still internal. Like, his flaw is still his arrogance. And it's his arrogance sort of chasing after that grief that he's experiencing in a way that's destructive. That destructive thing is so key because we see him repeat dying or watching her die. The fact that he goes through that car crash, which is horrific to begin with, even in the 2016 film, it always catches me off guard how, horrific that car accident is. And he goes through that willingly. Yeah. Multiple times. And you see the trauma in the animation. I loved the animation in What If. Good voice acting for this episode. I found it a little bit hit or miss over the series as a whole, but I think Rachel McAdams and Benedict Wong and Benedict Cumberbatch, the two Benedicts, did a really good job here. Like I said before, it's also that sunk cost fallacy idea. Like, he's already relived this horrific thing multiple times. Yeah. And then he goes through the centuries of transformation. And to turn back is to admit that was all for nothing. We really struggle to do that as humans. Yeah, totally. It's really hard. The fact that we have a name for it. Yes. The sunk cost fallacy tells us that it's part of our condition, right? I was watching a comedy special called Jigsaw by Daniel Sloss, and he has an amazing bit on relationships. And he's like, if you realize you've wasted some time in a relationship, you have a choice to make. Do you acknowledge you wasted 5 years on a relationship that isn't for you, or do you waste the rest of your life? Oof. Yeah. And look, a lot of us would be like, I've put 5 years into this relationship, I'm going to stay. I think when I see that, characters getting corrupted by drugs or something, there's not really a reason for it. And it's not always in their nature. One of the first things Weiland calls it the characteristic moment we see Stephen do. Why do they crash? He indicates and swerves around a truck. That's the reason. And we see the same thing in the 2016 film. He loses his hands because he's texting and driving, essentially. Yeah. It's arrogance. And we see he's arrogant from the beginning, and that's what's going to get him at the end. Yeah. And I think when you come back to the student films and I guess ideas for writers who are listening, right? To nail in on a big example that I've seen too much is this person's using too many drugs. And it's well, what reason do they have to do that? Should it end tragically? Potentially not. because they need the proper warnings. They need the proper opportunity to step out. Like Doctor Strange has, with every single warning, he has a way back. The Ancient One gives him the choice to turn back. Wong says, just don't even go there. You know,
We're talking about, before, how Rhodey is the brain cell of the MCU. I will add Wong.
Yeah.
Wong can have the other brain cell of the MCU. Yeah, if you wanted to go see like a good example of a negative change arc around drugs, is Rue in Euphoria. And an interesting thing about Rue is in the beginning, they make drugs look a little glamorous. The show's been criticized for that, I think unfairly, because she does go through a corruption arc with her drugs and her drug use. But you really understand why Rue is on drugs and why it's so hard to give up.
Yeah.
Same way we understand why Stephen wants Christine back so badly.
Yeah, the grief is an understandable emotion. It's an emotion that we've all felt. And you can understand why someone with access to that kind of power might chase that.
Yes.
To recap, the 5 ingredients.
The 5 ingredients. What are the 5 ingredients of tragedy, Ibby?
A flaw that your character lives out of. In this case, his obsession and also his arrogance. Second ingredient is warnings. I will say warnings. You should have
need
them
multiple
all throughout.
warnings. If you get told once at the beginning, that's not enough.
No. It needs to be constantly saying, turn back, turn back, turn back.
And they're not mad at him either, which I think is interesting. Like Wong and the Ancient One are very like, we know this isn't necessarily you. We see good in you. You can come back.
They care about him.
They
and
really
they're like,
care.
we know why you're doing this, but it's not going to help.
They have a very sweet line with like good Stephen being like, I need to do this. And then to Wong, he's like, at least to save you. Friends.
Yeah. Number 3 is a false victory. The path should deliver, at least for the first bit, what it promises. So Stephen is able to find the power to break a fixed point. He is able to bring Christine back as we get to the climax. So yeah, don't just immediately knock your character back. The false victory is the thing that propels the character forward. And so it's really important that they see a way forward into the path of destruction. Ingredient number 4, the realization. Make sure they have a realization that comes too late. And then ingredient number 5, have them face the consequences of their actions and of the path that they've gone down, probably as per the warnings they were given.
Yeah, and then the last line of the episode is actually, one life, one choice, one moment can destroy the entire universe. And he says that at the beginning as well. Like we're told what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes off and he joins the Guardians of the Multiverse.
Yes.
And they fight Vision Ultron with the Infinity Stones.
Loved Vision Ultron.
It's so creepy.
Such a good bad guy. That was our episode on what if and how to write tragedy. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, make sure you click follow or subscribe on whichever platform you're on. And if you have the time, leave us a review or tell a friend. It helps us grow the show and bring you more episodes, such as our upcoming analysis of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Hawkeye. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, or just email us. Feel free to say hi and share your thoughts. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat.
If everyone in your life is telling you not to do a thing, maybe don't do it.
What?
No.